The heat that summer had a weight to it. By the middle of the afternoon, the long lawn at Halstow Hall lay under it like something drugged, and the guests had drifted into the shade of the marquee, and the hired band from Marlbrook went on playing because nobody had thought to tell them to stop. Thomasin Bramwell had been on her feet since 6 that morning. She had counted the glasses herself, and moved the ice pails out of the sun, and sent the second footman back to the dairy for cream, because the cream that came up first was on the turn and would have been sour by 5. Nobody had asked her to do any of it, and nobody had thanked her for it, which she had long ago stopped expecting and had never once resented, because the work was the work, whether or not a soul in the county saw it done. She was 24. She had been mistress of Halstow for 2 years in the way that a woman may be mistress of a house without anybody inside it quite believing her. She heard the thing before she saw it. That was the part she remembered afterward, not the blow. The sound that came before the blow, which was a hush, the particular hush of 80 people deciding at the same instant not to speak. It came across the lawn from the rose walk toward the marquee the way a wind comes, laying the grass down flat ahead of itself. Thomasin set down the jug she was holding and turned. Miss Lavinia Sarn was coming up the lawn. She was a tall young woman in pale yellow, and she was beautiful in the way that cost a great deal of money to be, and she was white to the lips. Behind her, at the mouth of the rose walk, stood Hollis Bramwell, with a glass in his hand and a look on his face that Thomasin had seen perhaps 4 times in 2 years and had never once been able to read. The band played. The lawn did not. "You will not do it," Lavinia Sarn said. Her voice was pitched for a drawing room and carried like a bell across 60 feet of clipped grass. "You will not put your name to it. Do you hear me? You will not sign." Thomasin had no notion on God's earth what she meant. "Miss Sarn," she said, "you are unwell. Come into the shade." It was the kindest thing she could have said, and it was the worst. Something in it broke the young woman clean across. She came the last 3 steps very fast, and her hand went up, and she struck Thomasin Bramwell across the face in front of the whole of the county. The sound of it went out over the lawn like a dropped plate. Thomasin did not stagger. She had been struck before by a machine in her father's mill when she was 9, and had put her hand where a hand should not go, and she had learned then the thing most people never learn, which is that the body wants very badly to fall down and does not have to. She stood. Her ear rang. Her eye watered, and she let it water and did not raise a hand to it. Nobody moved. 80 people, and every one of them a person of consequence, and not one of them moved. They stood holding their glasses in the heat and watched, the way people watch a house burn, appalled and unable to look away and doing nothing whatever. Lavinia Sarn's hand came up a second time. It did not arrive. A man had come out of the crowd without anybody noticing him come, and he caught her wrist in the air high before it had begun to fall. He did it without violence, the way a man catches a door that is swinging shut. He was perhaps 32, dark, plainly dressed for that company, and he had stood at the edge of the marquee the better part of an hour, watching everything and speaking to almost no one. "No," he said. "Once was a misfortune. Twice would be a habit." He let her wrist go. He did not let it go at once. Thomasin saw that. He held it half a heartbeat past the moment when holding it was necessary, and his eyes went down to it, and something crossed his face that was not anger and was not pity, and she could not name it and did not forget it. Then Lavinia Sarn snatched her arm back, and the loose yellow glove slid an inch down her forearm, and Thomasin saw for about as long as it takes to blink that there was a bruise on that wrist, the color of a plum, and that it was old. Days old. It had not been made in the last 3 seconds by anybody at all. Then the glove came up and the arm came down, and the moment was gone. Thomasin Bramwell turned to the lawn. There is a thing that happens to a gathering at such a moment, and every woman who has run a house knows it. The gathering is deciding what the story will be, and it decides in about 11 seconds, and after that it cannot be changed by anything short of a death. "Mrs. Ivel," she said, quite clearly to the wife of the rector, who was nearest and whose mouth was open. "You were telling me about your hives before we were interrupted. I want the whole of it. I mean to have bees at Halstow, and I am told I will make a ruin of it." She heard her own voice come out level and warm and slightly amused, and she wondered at it as one wonders at a stranger. "Prine," she said, "the band is faltering. Tell them to play the second thing again, the one with the horn in it. And take the ice into the marquee before we lose the whole of it to the sun." The butler bowed and went. "Miss Sarn is unwell," Thomason said, "to nobody and therefore to everybody. It is the heat. It has been a wicked heat all week." And then she did the thing that the county talked about for a year afterward, which was that she put her arm through Lavinia Sarn's arm, gently on the side of the bruise, and walked the young woman who had just struck her across the lawn and into the cool of the house herself, past 80 staring people, at a perfectly ordinary pace, talking the whole way about bees. The band began the second thing again. The horn came in. Somebody laughed too loudly, and then somebody else did, and the lawn closed over the hole like water. When Thomason came back out, her face powdered and her eye still watering, the dark man who had caught the wrist was gone. She learned who he had been from the rector's wife, who was breathless with it. He was Alaric, Duke of Ashcombe. He had come 30 miles. He had not been invited. That was the first thing Thomason Bramwell did not understand. The second came at 9 o'clock when the carriages had gone, and she was standing in the dark passage outside the gun room with an unlit candle because there was a stone in one of her shoes and she had stopped to get it out. Her husband was in the gun room with his agent. The door was not quite shut. "It will not signify," Hollis Bramwell was saying. "Sarn is a fool, and she has made a fool of herself in front of the county, which is the best day's work she ever did for me. As for my wife," there was the sound of a decanter. "As for my wife, she will do exactly as she has always done. She will tidy it away and say nothing. There is no more spirit in her than a blank sheet. She has been paper since the day I married her, and she will be paper still at Michaelmas, when I mean to have her out of this house, and she will go quietly, and she will go with nothing, because there is nothing of hers here to take." Thomason stood in the dark passage with her shoe in her hand. Enoch Prine, who had come along the passage with a tray and had stopped 4 feet behind her in the shadow, stood too. He was 61 years old and had been in service since he was 11, and in that time he had carried a great many trays, passed a great many marriages, and repeated nothing. He had a face like a closed drawer. He did not cough, or make any of the small, merciful noises a good servant makes to spare a lady the knowledge that she has been seen. He simply waited, because he judged that she would rather not be spared, and he was right. After a moment, Thomason Bramwell put her shoe back on. She took the unlit candle and went up the back stairs, and she did not hurry, and her spine was straight. Prine stood where he was for a while with the tray in his hands. He was thinking about the arm. Any woman may stand and take a blow. It is only pride, and it costs nothing but skin. But it had taken his mistress about 11 seconds, by his own reckoning, to decide what the story of that afternoon would be, and then she had walked the girl who struck her indoors on her own arm, and by doing it had made it impossible for the county to hang Lavinia Sarn. Prine had seen a duchess do something like it once, 40 years ago, and it had been reckoned a very great thing at the time. A blank sheet, his master had said. Prine, who had spent his life in rooms where the truth was not spoken aloud, thought that his master had never in the whole of his life held a sheet of paper up to the light. He filed the thought where he kept such things. Then he went down to the still room and made up a bowl of cold water and vinegar and carried it up himself, which was no part of his office, and left it outside the mistress's door with a folded cloth beside it, and knocked once and did not wait to be seen. Thomason found it there. At midnight, she stood looking at it for a long moment before she took it in. She did not cry. She had a great deal to do. She sat down at the little table by the window and unlocked her workbox and took out the papers. Because it was the last week of July, and that meant Fisk. Here was what nobody at Halstow Hall knew. Thomasin Bramwell had not been born a lady, and had never pretended otherwise, and the county had forgiven her for it because her father had been rich. Corvin Redgate had owned the paper mill at Nettlecombe, and his father before him, and Redgate laid paper had gone out of that valley for 80 years, to lawyers and printers, and the better sort of stationer in 3 counties. She had learned the trade the way other girls learn the pianoforte, which is to say daily and without being asked whether she wished to. Her father had taught her to hold a sheet up to the light before he taught her to read what was written on it. He said that anybody could read a page. It took a Redgate to know what the page was made of. Then there had been the bad year, and the bank at Marbrook had gone down, and a man named Barnaby Fisk had held her father's paper, in the other sense of the word, and had held it very tight indeed. Corvin Redgate had died on a Tuesday in November, with the mill sold and the house sold, and a debt of £980 still standing against his name. Thomasin had signed for it. She had been 22, and she had understood exactly what she was doing, and she had done it anyway, because the alternative was to let her father go into the ground a bankrupt and his workmen go unpaid, and there are some things a person will not do even when they are the sensible thing. £980, payable to Barnaby Fisk of Marbrook, in 14 quarterly parts of £70 each, and a private matter between herself and him, and no husband's name upon it anywhere. She had married Hollis Bramwell 11 weeks later. She did not tell herself pretty lies about why. He had been handsome and easy and in a hurry, and he had wanted a wife who came with money that had not quite finished arriving, and she had wanted a roof and a name and a place where nobody would look for a bankrupt's daughter with a debt in her own hand. He had never once asked what her father's affairs had come to. It had not occurred to him that a Redgate might come with anything but money. She had married to disappear. That was the whole of it. She had walked into Halstow Hall, meaning to be quiet and useful and invisible for 3.5 years, and to pay Barnaby Fisk every quarter out of her own pin money, and to come out at the other end, owing nothing to any man alive. 11 of the 14 payments were made. 3 remained: Michaelmas, Christmas, Lady Day, and then she was free. Her husband, who did not know that any of this existed, had chosen Michaelmas to put her out of the house. Thomasin drew the candle nearer and took out the paper she wrote on, which was the last of it, the last riem in the world of Redgate laid, come out of the mill under her father's own hand the spring before he died. There had been 500 sheets. She had kept her account on it for 2 years, and every figure she had ever entered against Barnaby Fisk's name was written on her father's paper in her own. She counted what was left, as she did on the last night of every month because it steadied her. 61 sheets. She trimmed the candle and began to write. Barnaby Fisk kept an office above a saddler's shop in Marlbrook, and Thomasin walked the 7 miles to it on the last Thursday of July, as she had walked them 11 times before, with £70 sewn into the lining of her work-bag and a story ready about visiting a milliner. She did not need the story. Nobody at Halstow asked her where she went. Fisk counted the money twice, and gave her a receipt in a hand like barbed wire, and she folded it away, and came out into the market street, and stood a moment in the sun feeling, as she always did, both lighter and colder. 3 payments left. Then she turned for home, and because the day was fine and the road was long and she had never in 2 years gone that way on foot, she came back over the hill and down through Nettlecombe. That was the first mistake she made, if you like, and it undid everything. Nettlecombe was a village of 40 houses in a fold of the ground with a beck running through it, and at the top of the green stood 2 buildings that Thomasin had seen 100 times from a carriage window and had never once looked at properly. One was a school. It was a good building, better than the church, built of dressed stone with a slate roof and tall windows made for light, and somebody had cared enough to carve a line of letters over the door. Thomasin stopped and read it. "Freely ye have received, freely give." 4 of the tall windows were boarded, The others were unglazed and open to the weather, and there were birds going in and out of them. The door was not locked because the door had no lock left. She pushed it and went in. Inside there were 8 long desks with benches, and the benches were furred with 3 years of dust, and a swallow had built above the master's chair. On the wall hung a slate with a copy still chalked on it, faint as breath. A quick brown fox. Somebody had written it out for children who were not there on a morning that had happened, and then had gone away and never come back to wipe it off. The inkwells in the desks were dry to the bottom. The bell rope was gone. Somebody had taken the bell rope, which told her most of it, because a man does not steal a bell rope from a school that anybody is watching. Beside the school stood a low terrace of 12 almshouses, and that was worse, because the almshouses were not empty. Thomasin counted the chimneys as she came down the green. 12 chimneys and 4 of them smoking, in a week when even the poorest cottage in that country kept a fire for the cooking. An old man was sitting on the step of the end house cutting a length of elder into pegs. "Good afternoon," Thomasin said. "Is the school shut for the harvest?" The old man looked up at her, and his face did a thing she had seen before on the faces of the very poor, which was to close over politely, like a hand. "Shut these 3 years, madam. Why is that? No mistress to keep it. Miss Bramwell kept it, and Miss Bramwell died, and there is no money for a mistress now." Thomasin stood on the green in the July heat. "The chimneys," she said. "There are only 4 smoking." "There are only 4 of us, madam. There was 11 when I came in. As they go, they are not filled." He turned the peg over in his hands, considering whether to say the rest of it, and decided because she had asked twice and had not moved away. It is put about that the trust is straightened. Mr. Crome settles it all, and Mr. Crome says the funds is fallen off, and we are none of us to trouble the family, what with the young lady's death and all. So we do not trouble them. He looked at his pegs. "It is only that I have been thinking lately, madam, that a thing does not fall off for 3 years running. A bad year, yes. 3 is not a year at all. 3 is a habit." Thomasin thanked him and walked the 4 miles home over the hill. She did not say a word to anybody about any of it, because she was a woman with a debt in her own hand and 3 payments to make and a husband who meant to put her out of the house at Michaelmas, and because whatever was happening at Nettlecombe was no affair of hers, and because she had come to Halstow to disappear. She had come to Halstow to disappear. She reminded herself of it the whole way over the hill, and it did not hold, and she could not think why. Lady Ulmeria Bramwell was 79 years old and lived in the 2 south rooms of Halstow Hall, and everybody in the house said she was going blind, and nobody had thought to say it to her face because she would have taken the skin off them. Thomasin sat with her most afternoons. It had begun as a duty, and had become the only hour of the day she liked. The old woman sat in a chair set square to the window with her hands on the arms of it, and her hands had gone to knots, and her hearing was as good as a hare's. She had been handsome once in a hard way, and was handsome still if he did not mind being looked at. 3 days after Nettlecombe, she said, without any preliminary at all, "You have stopped talking, have I, madam? You talked for 2 years about nothing whatever, very pleasantly, like a well-brought-up clock. Now you sit there thinking and it makes a noise. What is it? Nothing that signifies. Do not be tactful with me." Lady Ulmeria turned her head, and her eyes went to a point some inches to the left of Thomasin's face, which was how Thomasin learned for certain about the blindness. "I am 79, and I have not the time. My grandson struck a bargain with you, and you have kept your half of it better than he has kept his. And you were struck in the face, in front of my whole acquaintance in my own garden, and you walked, the girl indoors on your arm, and I could not see it, and I have thought about nothing else for a fortnight. Now, what is it?" So Thomasin told her. She had not meant to, but there is a particular relief in being asked a true question by somebody who wants the true answer. And she had been carrying it alone over a hill for 3 days. She told her about the boarded windows and the swallow, and the copy still chalked on the slate. She told her about the bell rope. She told her about 12 chimneys and 4 of them smoking, and about an old man who had thought it out on a doorstep and got it right. Lady Almeria did not move at all while she spoke. When it was finished, the old woman said, "Say the word freely, madam, over the door. Say it, freely ye have received, freely give, my mother-in-law." Chose that. Lady Almeria's ruined hands had closed on the arms of the chair. "Madda, the money is not Bramwell money, and never was. It came out of Malbrook with old Lady Ashcombe 80 years since, and it was left in trust for the school and the 12 almshouses at Nettlecombe, £5,000 of it, and the trust has 2 trustees always, one of that family and one of this. The Ashcombe trustee is a boy I have not seen in 3 years. The Bramwell trustee is myself." There was a silence of a length that Thomason did not care for at all. "I have signed the quarterly accounts of that trust every Michaelmas of my life," Lady Almeria said. "They are read to me, and I put my name where my finger is set. For the last 3 years they have been read to me by Mr. Peveril Crome." She turned her face to the window she could not see. "Out of my granddaughter kept that school, Ismay. She was 31, and she was worth the whole of us together, and she took a fever in the March and was in the ground at Nettlecombe before the month was out, and there has been no one since who could tell me whether a window was glazed or a chimney smoked. I have been signing my name to a thing I cannot see for 3 years, and a man has been standing at my elbow, telling me what it says." "Madam," Thomason said, "I am very sorry. It is the least useful sentence in the language, and I will not have it in this room." The old woman's chin came up. "You will do better than sorry. Give me your hand." Thomason gave it, and had it gripped hard enough to hurt. "I cannot read and I cannot walk to Nettlecombe, and I will not be pitied. So I shall do the other thing, which is to lend you what I have. From this day, you are my eyes. You will read to me every paper that comes into this house for my signature, aloud, and you will read them first to yourself, and where a thing does not sit right, you will say so. That is a lawful office, and no man in England can take it from a blind woman. Not my grandson, not Crome, not the king. My authority in this house is a good deal older than theirs, and it will hold. Madam, I am obliged to tell you that Mr. Bramwell means me to be gone from Halstow at Michaelmas. I know what my grandson means. I have known him since he was in a basket." Something crossed the old woman's face that was not quite pleasure and was near it. "That is Michaelmas quarter day. The trust accounts are made up and laid before the Marlbrook bench at Michaelmas also, and signed by both trustees, and it wants 9 weeks. You have 9 weeks, girl. I suggest you use them." She used them. The house did not believe in her, and the house said so in the way of houses, below stairs, and out of her hearing. There was a book kept in the servants' hall by the end of the first week of August, and the wagers in it were written in pencil and rubbed out when the bell rang, and every soul at Halstow knew of it. "A shilling," said the mistress, "would be gone by Michaelmas with a coach and a cloak," and no more said Nan, the upper housemaid, who liked her had put 6 pence quietly on the 5th of October, allowing a fortnight for the lawyers. Thomason knew about the book within 4 days, because a woman who has been invisible for 2 years hears a great deal that louder people miss. She did not resent it. She thought it on the whole a very reasonable bet. She had made much the same one herself. She did not mean to win it by argument. She had never in her life won anything by argument. She meant to win it the only way she trusted, which was to be quietly and without any fuss indispensable, until one morning the house woke and could not recall how it had managed before her, and the question the wager asked had stopped meaning anything at all. So she did not scold, and she did not command, and she did not once say aloud that Lady Almeria had given her an office. She began with the almshouse chimneys, because they were the smallest thing, and she had learned in a mill that you begin with the smallest thing that can be finished. A sweep from Marlbrook did all 12 in a day and a half, and was paid £2 4 out of her own pin money, which she entered on her father's paper that night in the column she kept for herself. 2 of the 8 cold houses turned out to have birds nesting in the flues, and one had a jackdaw's hole cathedral, 40 years of sticks, and the old man who cut the elder pegs stood in the road and watched it come down and laughed until he had to sit on the step. She had the school windows glazed next. That cost £11, and it took the whole of her quarter and left her with nothing at all until Michaelmas. And she did it anyway, and told nobody, and when the glazier asked whose name the account should stand in, she said her own. She had the swallow's nest left exactly where it was until the young had flown, and then taken down whole and put on a shelf in the porch, because it seemed to her that a thing which had lived in a house had some claim on it. At the back of the master's cupboard she found Ismay Bramwell's register. It was a plain book in a plain hand, and it ran to the March. She died and stopped in the middle of a week. 41 children by name. Attendance marked, and against some of the names small private notes in pencil that no one had ever been meant to read. Slow at figures, quick at everything. Comes without breakfast, do not remark on it. Mother poorly, be gentle. Thomason sat down on a dusty bench and read the whole of it in the light of the new windows. Then she cleaned the cover with a cloth and did not throw away a single page of it, and she wrote the next entry underneath the last one in her own hand, 3 years after, and put the book back in the cupboard, where its owner had kept it. The school opened again on the 18th of August with Hannah Poole, the sexton's daughter, to keep it, at £8 a year found by Lady Almeria out of her own private purse, and 29 children came the first morning because their mothers had walked them up the green to see if it was true. None of this reached the ears of Halstow Hall, where Mr. Bramwell was shooting, and Mr. Crome was busy, and nobody had gone to Nettlecombe in 3 years. It reached the Duke of Ashcombe on the 2nd of September, at 6:15 in the evening, because he was riding the Malbrook Road on his way to somewhere else, as he had ridden it perhaps 40 times since his cousin's money had been quietly allowed to fall off, and because he had made a private habit each time of looking down into the fold of the ground at a boarded building he had endowed, and could not mend, and hating himself for a full half-mile afterward. He looked down that evening, and the windows were lit. He sat his horse in the road for some time. Then he turned it, and went down the hill instead of on, and by 7 o'clock the Duke of Ashcombe was standing in the doorway of the school at Nettlecombe with his hat in his hand, looking at a swallow's nest on a shelf in the porch, and a room with 41 names chalked up in a new hand, and asking a very frightened young woman of 19 who had done all this. "The lady from the hall, your grace," said Hannah Poole. "Which lady from the hall?" "Mrs. Bramwell, sir, the one that was struck." Mr. Peveril Crome brought the first of the Michaelmas papers up to the south rooms on the 9th of September. He was a wide, mild, unhurried man of 50, with a good coat and a soft step, and he had been land agent at Halstow for 9 years, and in all that time Thomason had never once heard him raise his voice or seen him in a hurry. He put the sheets on the little table at Lady Almeria's elbow, and said what he always said, which was that it was the usual quarterly business, and would her ladyship like it read. "Mrs. Bramwell reads to me now," said Lady Almeria. There was a pause of about the length of a held breath. "Certainly, my lady," said Mr. Crome. He went away, and Thomason took the papers to the window, and did not read them aloud at all. She read them to herself first, twice, as she had been told to. The trust account for the quarter ran to 1.5 pages in a clerk's fair hand. It was a decent, plain, wholly convincing document. It set out the income of the £5,000, and the small rents, and against them the outgoings. And the outgoings were these: to the schoolmistress, nothing, the school being shut. To the poor of the 12 tenements, £90 in coals, bread, and necessaries. To sweeping and general maintenance of the 12 tenements, £42. Thomason stood at the window and read the last line 4 times. She had paid a sweep out of Marlbrook to do all 12 chimneys in a day and a half, and she had paid him £2 4 shillings, and she had his bill in her workbox upstairs with his name on it and a thumbprint of soot in the corner, and she had entered it on her father's paper the same night in her own hand. £2 4 shillings, £42, and the 12 tenements were not maintained. She had counted the chimneys herself. There had been 40 years of jackdaw in one of them. £90 in coals and bread to 4 old people in a village where a family lived on 11 shillings a week. Thomasin put the paper down on the sill very carefully, as though it might go off. Then she read it aloud to Lady Almeria in an even voice from beginning to end, and said nothing whatever about the figures, and watched the old woman set her finger on the place and sign her name where the finger was. She was very good at saying nothing. She had had a great deal of practice. She had learned it in a building where saying anything was dangerous. In a paper mill the rag engines run day and night, and the noise is such that nobody speaks except to shout, and a girl who shouts in a mill is a girl who has not learned to watch, and a girl who has not learned to watch will one day put her hand where a hand should not go. Thomasin had put her hand there once at 9 years old, and had come away with 2 fingers that still ached in the wet and a permanent education. After that she watched. She watched the beaters and the vats and the men, and she learned that a person who is silent for long enough is eventually treated as furniture, and that furniture sees everything. And she had learned the other thing, too, the thing her father taught her at the sorting table before he taught her to read. "Anybody can read a page," he said. "It takes a Redgate to know what the page is made of. A page will lie about anything you like. It will lie in a fair hand, in good ink, with a date on it, and a name at the bottom, and a wafer of red sealing wax to swear to it. But no sheet of paper that ever came off a mold in this world can lie about what it is made of, because it was made before the lie was thought of, and it does not care who is holding it." Thomasin folded her hands in her lap and sat with an old blind woman until the light went. Mr. Crome came to find her 3 evenings. Later in the muniment room where she had gone with a candle to fetch Lady Almeria's spectacle case. He did not knock because there was no door to knock on, and he was suddenly, simply there in the passage, filling it, mild as milk. "You are abroad late, madam. Her ladyship has mislaid her glasses." "Ah." He came 2 steps into the room, soft-footed for a heavy man, and looked about it in an interested way at the presses and the deed boxes and the long shelf of estate books. "It is a great deal of reading you have taken on. A great deal of small print for a lady's eyes. I hope you find it repays you. It is her ladyship's office. I am only the eyes." "Just so," he smiled. He had a pleasant smile, and it never once got as far as anything else in his face. "You will allow me to say, madam, and I say it with respect, that it is not a comfortable position. A lady with no family in the county, no fortune of her own, no friend at law." He let each of them fall separately, like a man setting coins on a counter. "And a husband, if you will forgive me, who has spoken very freely to me about Michaelmas. You are frank, Mr. Crome. I am a frank man." The smile stayed exactly where it was. "So I shall be franker. Marlbrook is a small town. A man of business in a small town hears everything twice. I hear, for instance, that a lady of this house walks in 7 miles 4 times a year, and goes up a stair by a saddler's shop, and comes down again lighter by £70, and that there is a bond in that office with her own name at the bottom of it, and no husband's name anywhere. £980, I believe it was. A debt in a wife's own hand is an irregular thing, madam. It would look very ill indeed if it were widely spoken of. It would look, to a man disposed to think ill, almost like a woman with something to conceal." Thomasin stood with the spectacle case in her hand and the candle throwing her shadow up the wall behind her, and she found to her own considerable surprise that her chief feeling was not fear. It was interest, because he had come to her. She had said nothing to anyone, accused nobody, altered no figure, and made no complaint, and yet here in a cold room at 10 at night was Mr. Peveril Crome, who was never in a hurry, taking a great deal of trouble to frighten a companionable nobody who read papers to a blind woman. Men do not take that trouble over furniture. She looked at him and saw it, under the smile. For about half a second he was afraid of her. "I keep very exact accounts, Mr. Crome," she said pleasantly. "It is the one thing I do that nobody has ever wished me to stop. Good night." She went past him with the candle. Her hands did not begin to shake until she was on the stairs. She did not go to Lady Almeria. She did not go to the Duke of Ashcombe, whose seat was 30 miles off, and who had sent, by his own groom, a civil note of thanks for the school that she had read 4 times and put in her workbox and taken out again. She did nothing at all. For 9 days, and her reasons were good ones, and one of them was cowardice. To speak was to be seen. To be seen was to have her name spoken aloud in a court and a coffee room, and behind her name stood Barnaby Fisk, and a bond with no husband's name on it, and a husband who wanted her gone, and who would find in that bond the exact stick he had been looking for. She would be turned out at Michaelmas as a woman who had brought a secret debt into an honest house. Fisk would hear of it within a week, and a creditor who hears that his debtor has lost her home does not wait. The last 3 payments would never be made, 11 of 14, and the whole thing lost at the 14th, and her father a bankrupt after all, and every promise she had signed for come to nothing. Against that, what had she? A sweep's bill for £2 4 shillings. It was not enough to hang a cat. Better to be quiet. It was not her trust. It was not her village. It was not her fight. She told herself all of that, and she was still telling herself all of that on the 18th of September, when she walked down into Nettlecombe with a basket, and found the green full of people and the school door shut. Hannah Poole was standing in the porch with the swallow's nest on the shelf behind her and a letter in her hand, and she had been crying and had stopped in the way of a girl who has decided that crying is a luxury. The letter was from the office of the agent. It regretted that the funds of the trust would not bear the charge of a schoolmistress, that the arrangement had been irregular and unauthorized, and that the school would be closed at Michaelmas quarter day. Old Ephraim Chance was sitting on his step at the end of the almshouse terrace with his elder Pegs, because it was where he always sat. "Do not take on, madam," he said, when Thomason came and stood in front of him and could not for a moment speak at all. It was a good 6 weeks. The little ones had 6 weeks of it, and that is 6 weeks more than they had. Warm chimneys, too. I've not been warm in September in 9 year. He turned to Peg over. "You will not go troubling his grace, nor the old lady over it. They have their own griefs, and we are not to be a burden on the family." "Mr. Chance," Thomason said, "who told you that you were not to be a burden on the family?" The old man thought about it honestly, which was how he did everything. "I could not say, madam. It is only what is understood." She walked home over the hill in the last of the light, and she was ashamed, because there it was, the whole machine laid out plain on a doorstep by a man cutting pegs. Crome had not needed to be clever. He had only needed to be patient. He had built the entire thing on the decency of other people, on a blind woman who signed where her finger was set, on a family too raw to look at the name Nettlecombe, on old paupers so thoroughly trained in gratitude that they apologized for the cold, on a village that understood, without anyone ever saying it aloud, that they were not to be a burden, and on a companionable nobody with a debt of her own who was frightened for her skin and had therefore said nothing for 9 days. Every single person in it was being good, and the goodness was the machinery, and it would go on turning until somebody was willing to be seen. Thomason came in at the side door, and went up and washed, and sat down at the little table by the window, and unlocked her workbox. She could not go to the trustees with a story. A story was a woman's spite, and Crome would call it that within an hour, and Hollis would call it worse. She could not get into the estate office, which was locked, and she would not have gone into it if it had stood open, because a thing taken out of a locked room can be argued away by any attorney in England, and a thing brought in freely from the daylight cannot. She needed the proof itself. She needed the true account and the sworn account standing side by side, built from the outside in, out of tradesmen's own books and old people's own marks, from witnesses that no man could wave away with a smile. She counted the sheets that were left of her father's paper because it steadied her. 53. Then she trimmed the candle and drew the first sheet toward her and began. She built it the way she had been taught to sort rag, which is to say by hand, one piece at a time, keeping the good from the bad and never guessing. She began with the sweep, who was easy because he was proud of his day and a half, and had his book in his cart, and he copied out the entry for her himself and made his mark to it and would not take anything for the trouble. She had the glazier's account next, which was her own, and the bill of the man in Marbrook who had sold her the slates for the porch. Then she went after the mason. The trust accounts for 3 years past ran with a name on them she had never once heard spoken in the village, and that was the first thing that was strange. Josiah Mould, mason of Marbrook, for the repair of the almshouse roofs, £140, Lady Day of the first year. For the leading of the school gutters, £62, the Michaelmas following. For repair of the almshouse roofs, again £112, the year after that. £314 of roofing on 12 small cottages, and the rain coming through the end house into a bucket that Ephraim Chance emptied twice a day and had emptied for 4 winters. Josiah Mould was a real man, and he had a yard behind the tan pit at Marbrook, and he was 70 and rheumatic and had not worked a full week in 5 years. Thomasin went to him on a Tuesday with a basket of her own preserves as her excuse, and found him sitting in the sun with his hands wrapped up in flannel. She asked him quite simply whether he had ever done any work at Nettlecombe. He said he had. He had rebuilt the school chimney the year the old Duke died, and he had been paid for it, £11 and some shillings, and he had the entry in his book, and would she like to see it? She would. She sat on an upturned bucket in a mason's yard for 2 hours with a book on her knee, and when she came away, she had a fair copy of every entry Josiah Mould had made against the name of Nettlecombe in 11 years, and his mark at the bottom of it, and his daughter's mark as witness. And there was not 1 shilling in the whole of it after the year the old Duke died. He had never mended a roof, he had never let a gutter, he had never in his life been paid £140 by anybody. "Who is it?" says I did. He asked her at the gate, not angry, only puzzled. "A paper says it, Mr. Mould." "Well," said the old man, "then the paper is a liar, and I never met one yet that could be shamed." She got the almshouse people next, and that took longer, because they had to be persuaded, one at a time, that they were not being disloyal. Ephraim Chance made his mark to a plain statement of what coal had come and what bread had come in each of the last 3 winters, which was less in the whole 3 years than the account allowed for one. Widow Sparrow at number 9 made hers. So did the 2 others. Hannah Poole wrote out, in a schoolmistress's careful hand, what her wages had been and who had paid them, and out of whose private purse. Every figure came to Thomasin from the outside, through a gate or over a doorstep, given freely by the person who owned it. She never once went into a locked room. She wanted, when the day came, to be able to say that in front of anybody. She did it at night, mostly, with the door bolted, and she did it on her father's paper. The stack went down, 46 of them by the 20th of the month, and every sheet of the difference entered in her own hand. She ruled every column twice, once in the true figures, and once in the figures the trust account showed, ruled side by side, because a thing set beside its own lie needs no argument at all. And on the 21st of September she found the paper. It was not cleverness. It was habit. Lady O'Meara had asked for the vouchers to be read over, all of them, the mason's receipts among them, and Crome had sent them up in a bundle with the fair account, and Thomasin sat down by the window to read them, and did what her hands had done since she was 6 years old, which was to take up the first sheet by 2 corners and hold it toward the light before she read a word of it. She was not looking for anything. She had simply never in her life read a sheet of paper without first looking through it. The watermark came up in the glass of the window like a fish coming up in water, a crown, and beneath the crown 2 initials, and beneath the initials the year of manufacture. Thomasin sat quite still. The voucher in her hand was dated Lady Day of the first year, 3 years and a half ago, and it acknowledged £140 for the repair of the almshouse roofs, and it was signed Josiah Mould in a slow, thick, laborious hand. And the sheet it was written on had been made 2 years after the date on its own face. She knew the mold mark. She could have picked it out of 100. It was Redgate Laid, from the second vat, and her father had run that vat himself, and the year in the watermark was the year he died. She put the sheet down on the table and put her hands flat on either side of it. Then she went through the rest of the bundle, 17 vouchers, 3 years of them, and 11 of the 17 were her father's paper, and every one of the 11 was dated before the paper it was written on had existed. Somebody in that house had sat down not long ago and written 3 years of history in one sitting, and they had written it on paper they had taken out of her own room. Thomasin went upstairs and unlocked her workbox and counted the last ream of Redgate Laid, which she had counted on the last night of every month for 2 years, and which had stood at 61 in July. There were 35 sheets in the box. By her own entries, there should have been 46. She had used 15 since July, and she had entered every one of them. 11 sheets were gone, 11 vouchers, 11 sheets. She sat on the floor by the box in the dark with the papers in her lap, and understood that she had made a serious mistake about who she was fighting. The Duke of Ashcombe came into the country on the 24th of September for the Michaelmas Trust accounts, as he had come every year and had every year been met at the door of a comfortable room by a mild man with a fair copy, and had signed and had gone away. This year he came 4 days early and went to Nettlecombe first. Thomasin found him in the school. He had a coat over the back of a bench, and he was up a short ladder with a hammer in his hand, refixing the lath that carried the bell, because the bell rope had been stolen and Hannah Poole had told him so, and he had asked her for a hammer. "You will not do it that way," said Thomasin from the doorway. "I am aware," said the Duke of Ashcombe, without turning round. "I am doing it that way notwithstanding. Good afternoon, madam." He came down the ladder. He was not a comfortable man, and did not try to be. There was a great deal shut up in his face, and it had been shut a long while, and Thomasin recognized the look because she had lived in a house with it for 2 years. Only in her husband it had been laziness wearing the coat of sorrow, and in this man it was the other way about. He was not cold, he was drowning. They fell into the way of meeting there. It was not arranged, and neither of them ever proposed it. She came down most afternoons with something the school wanted, and he was most afternoons there, mending some small thing badly, and they talked of the roof and the coals and the price of slate, and once at unreasonable length of bees. He had a dry, exact humor that arrived so quietly. She twice nearly missed it. He spoke of Ismay Bramwell once, only once. It was late, and the light was going, and the children had gone home, and he was sitting on the bench under the boarded window that was not boarded anymore, turning a piece of new lath over and over in his hands. "She was to have married me," he said. Thomasin did not say anything at all. It was not settled. We had said nothing to anybody on account of my mother who was ill and my own excellent judgment, which told me there was a great deal of time. He turned the lath over. I was in Lisbon on my mother's business when she took the fever. I had a letter that said she was poorly, and I stayed 11 days to finish what I was doing, because it could not wait. I have never afterward been able to remember one single thing that could not wait. She was buried at Nettlecombe a week before I came into the Channel. He set the lath down. I paid £400 into the trust the year after, over and above what was due from me, and told Crome to lay it out on the school. I could not come and look at it, so I sent money instead, which is what a man of my sort does when he cannot bear a thing, and I rode past it 40 times in 3 years, and never once went down the hill. Thomasin did not tell him that she was very sorry. She had learned from his fellow trustee that it was the least useful sentence in the language. Instead, she took Ismay Bramwell's register out of her basket, where it had been for a week, because she had known for a week that she would give it to him and had not known how. "This was in the master's cupboard," she said. "It is her hand. There are 41 children in it, and she has written something against a good many of the names, in pencil, that nobody was ever meant to read. Comes without breakfast. Do not remark on it. Mother poorly. Be gentle. Slow at figures, quick at everything." She put it into his hands. "I never met her," Thomason said, "but I have read her private opinion of 41 children, and I can tell you that she was not gentle by nature. Gentle people do not need to write themselves instructions." The Duke of Ashcombe sat in a schoolroom with a dead woman's register open on his knee, and after a while his shoulders went once, and he put his hand over his eyes, and Thomason got up and went and stood in the porch and looked at the swallow's nest on the shelf until he was ready. When she came back in, he had shut the book and was quite composed. "You have been at this 2 months," he said. "The chimneys, the glass, the mistress. My grandmother's trust does not pay you, and my cousin's family does not thank you, and I am told on good authority that you are to be turned out of Halstow at quarter day." He looked up. "Why?" It was the question she could not answer honestly without answering all of it. So she gave him a true thing that was not the whole thing. "Because a thing that was built to be given away is being quietly kept," she said. "There is a line cut over that door, Your Grace. It is not a sentiment, it is an instruction, and somebody has been ignoring it for 3 years, and I cannot bear waste. My father made paper. He would sooner have burned a ream than let it go soft in a damp store. It is my besetting fault. Something happened at the corner of the Duke's mouth that was not a smile and was near it." "I begin to believe you," he said. "The near thing came on the 27th, and it did not come from Crome." Thomason came up from the school at dusk and found her own bedroom door standing open, and her husband inside it, and her workbox on the bed with the false bottom lifted out, and 3 months of her father's paper spread across the counterpane in the candlelight. Hollis Bramwell had a sheet in each hand. "What," he said, "is this?" There was one instant standing in the doorway in which Thomason understood the whole of her position with perfect clarity. He had the true accounts of the Nettlecombe Trust in his left hand. He had, in his right, the tally of her payments to Barnaby Fisk, and he had not yet read either of them properly, because he was a man who never read anything properly, and he was looking not at the figures but at her face, waiting to be told what to think. If she lied, he would read them. So she did not lie. She told him a truth, and she chose which one. "That is my debt," she said. "It is £980. My father died owing it, and I signed for it at 22, in my own name, with no man's name beside mine, and I have paid 11 parts of 14 out of my own pin money, and I have 3 left." She came into the room and stood by the bed. "You did not ask, and I did not tell you, and I have been ashamed of that for 2 years. Now you know. I have no fortune, Mr. Bramwell, I never had. I have a debt." She watched it land. She watched him move, in about 4 seconds, from suspicion to astonishment to a species of enormous relief, because a wife with a secret was a danger, and a wife with a debt was merely a fool, and a fool he already had the measure of. And under the relief, coming up fast, a kind of pleasure, because this was the stick. This was the thing that made Michaelmas easy, and made it her fault, and he could see the whole of it laid out in front of him like a dinner. He laughed. He actually laughed, and dropped both sheets on the bed without looking at either, and said, "Near £1,000. Good God, you brought me nothing at all," and went out of the room to tell somebody about it. Thomason shut the door, and bolted it, and stood with her back against it for a long moment. Then she gathered every sheet, the true and the false, in their 2 ruled columns, and the 17 vouchers, and the 11 that were made of her father, and she put them back in the box, and locked it. 2 days to quarter day. Michaelmas quarter day came in bright and cold, with the first real edge of autumn on it, and the trustees of the Marbrook bequest met at 11 in the morning in the long room at Halstow Hall. There were more people in it than there had been in 30 years. Lady Elmiria in her chair by the fire with her hands on the arms of it, the Duke of Ashcombe standing at the window with his back to the light. Mr. Peveril Crome at the table with his bundle, squared in front of him. Hollis Bramwell by the door in a very good coat, with Miss Lavinia Sarn beside him in grey, which the whole county afterward agreed was the boldest thing anybody had done in that room all day. Enoch Prine against the wall with a tray he had no use for. Thomason sat at the end of the table with her workbox on her knees. Crome read the account. He read it beautifully, in a mild, unhurried, entirely convincing voice, and when he had finished he turned the sheet and set it in front of Lady Elmiria and put her finger on the place. "If your ladyship will sign."
"Mrs. Bramwell reads to me now,"
said Lady Elmiria, and did not move her hand, and that was the moment the door opened, because Michaelmas is quarter day for everybody, and Barnaby Fisk had come out from Marbrook to be paid. He came in past the footman with his hat still on. He was a small, dry, entirely respectable man, and he had no notion at all of what he was walking into, and no interest in it either. "I am sorry to intrude on a family occasion," he said, "but I have ridden 7 miles, and I will not ride them twice, Mrs. Bramwell. £70 is due to me this day upon the bond, and I am told at the office you have sent no word." The room went very quiet. Thomason had £11 and some shillings in the world. The rest of her quarter was in the windows of a school 4 miles off. "I cannot pay you today, Mr. Fisk," she said. "Then I shall have to take other measures, madam, and I am sorry for it." Hollis Bramwell came off the doorframe like a man arriving at a party. "A bond," he said. "You hear it, your grace. A bond. In this house. In my wife's own name. Near £1,000 of it. Contracted before she ever came here and concealed from me for 2 years. She told me herself not 2 nights ago. My wife is a bankrupt's daughter with a secret debt and a habit of copying other people's accounts by candlelight, and she has been 3 months making very free with the affairs of this trust. And I leave it to any man of sense in this room to say why a woman in that position troubles herself with money that is not hers. He was enjoying it. That was the thing Thomason found she could not forgive. Afterward, when she had forgiven a great deal else, he was enjoying it. "She is not a fit person to read a paper to my grandmother," said Hollis Bramwell, "and she leaves this house today." Thomason looked at the Duke of Ashcombe. He had come off the window. His face had shut. It had shut exactly as she had seen 100 doors shut in her life, quietly and without any particular malice. And she watched him decide that she had lied to him, and she understood precisely what it looked like from where he stood. A woman with a hidden bond. A woman with no money who had spent £11 on glass and could not say where it came from. A woman who had been 3 months copying figures in the dark. She sat with her workbox on her knees and waited for the terror to arrive. It did not come. That was the strangest thing. She had dreaded this exact moment for 2 years, had lain awake over it, had shaped her whole life to keep it from arriving, and here it was, in a bright room in front of everybody she knew, and the dread had simply gone out of it, the way a fire goes out and leaves the room lighter than you expected. There was only the truth left, and the truth was quite simple, and she had it in a box on her knees. Thomason Bramwell stood up. "Every word my husband has said is true," she said, and her voice carried down the length of the room. "I am the daughter of Corvin Redgate, who made paper at Nettlecombe, and who died owing £980. I signed the bond for it at 2 and 20 in my own name, because the alternative was to let his workmen go unpaid. And I have paid 11 parts of 14 out of my pin money, and I cannot pay the 12th today because I spent it in August on £11 of window glass for the school on the green." She set the workbox on the table. "I have concealed it. I concealed it to survive and not to deceive anybody, and I am done with it now, and Mr. Fisk may have his money the day I have it, and not 1 hour sooner." She turned from her husband to the two trustees. "And I have been copying accounts, 3 months of them. They are in this box fair and complete, and I ask your ladyship and your grace to look at them, because the trust of which you are the trustees has been robbed for 3 years running, and I can prove it before this room rises." "This is monstrous," said Mr. Crome. "To the sweeping and maintenance of the 12 tenements, £42, said Thomason. "I had the 12 chimneys swept myself in August by a man from Malbrook. He charged me £2 4 shillings, and I have his bill and his mark. There was 40 years of jackdaw in one of them." She laid a sheet on the table. "To Josiah Mould, mason, for repair of the almshouse roofs, £140. Josiah Mould is alive and in his yard behind the tan-pit and has not worked a full week in 5 years, and I have a fair copy of every entry in his own book against the name of Nettlecombe in 11 years, with his mark and his daughter's mark to it, and there is not a shilling in it since the old Duke died. He has never mended a roof at Nettlecombe. The rain comes into the end house into a bucket, and Mr. Chance empties it twice a day and has done for 4 winters. She laid down the next sheet, and the next. "To the poor of the 12 tenements, £90 in coals and bread. 4 people live in those 12 houses. They have made their marks to what they were given each winter, and it is less in 3 years than that account allows for one." "You will forgive me," said Crome, and he was still smiling, and his voice had gone up perhaps half a tone. "But this is a companion with a slate. These are vouchers, signed and dated, in the tradesman's own hands here." He took one out of the bundle and held it up in the light of the window, quite high, so that the room could see it. Josiah Mould's own hand, and Josiah Mould's own name. "Lady Day, of the 1st year." Am I to be told that a lady with a grievance knows better than the paper? Thomason Bramwell looked at the sheet he was holding up against the window. "Yes," she said. "Hold it there, Mr. Crome. Do not move your hand." Something in her voice stopped him doing the one thing that would have saved him, which was to put it down. "Your Grace," said Thomason, "will you look through that sheet?" The Duke of Ashcombe crossed the room and looked, and everybody in the long room at Halstow watched him do it. "There is a crown," he said slowly, "and 2 letters, and a year. Read the year." He read it. "That voucher is dated Lady Day of the 1st year," said Thomason. "The sheet it is written on was made 2 years afterward. It is Redgate laid, from the 2nd vat. My father ran that vat with his own hands, and that is the year he died, and that mark was never on a sheet of paper in this world one day before it. The bundle was on the table. Nobody had to be told what to do with it." The Duke of Ashcombe took the 17 vouchers to the window, and held them up one after another, and Lady Almeria sat bolt upright in her chair, with her blind eyes on nothing at all, and the room counted with him. 11 of the 17. 3 years of history, written in one sitting, on paper that had not existed when it was dated. "Show me the rest," said the Duke of Ashcombe. "All of it. Now, they did it in that room, and it took the rest of the day and half the night. Prine sent the carriage out, and the tradesmen came in their Sunday coats, uneasy in a great house, and stood one at a time at the end of the long table, and laid their own books beside Thomason's fair copies, and swore to the figures. The sweep, the glazier, Josiah Mould, who had to be helped in and who sat down without being asked, and who looked at the voucher with his name on it for a long time, and then said that he had never in his life spelled it that way. Hannah Poole came and told them what her wages were, and whose purse they came out of. Ephraim Chance came in a coat that had been his brother's, and made his mark by candlelight, and apologized twice for the trouble, and Thomason found she had to go and stand in the window for a moment. By 8 in the evening the thing was past arguing about, and Mr. Peveril Crome had stopped smiling and had begun instead to talk. He talked for a long while. He was mild and reasonable and enormously detailed, and the substance of it, when you cut it down, was that he was an agent who had carried out instructions, and that the money had not stayed with him, and that he could show where it had gone. Win quote. Then he put on the table a second small bundle, tied with tape, of receipts for the monies drawn out of the trust across 3 years, and every one of them was endorsed in the same clear feminine hand. L. Sarn. L. Sarn. Miss Lavinia Sarn, who had sat in a gray gown by the door for 9 hours, and had said nothing whatever, made a small sound. "There," said Crome with enormous gentleness. "I am sorry for it, but you will see, Your Grace, that I am not the person you want." And Hollis Bramwell said, "Good God, Lavinia," he said it beautifully. It was the best thing he did all day, and it was 2 words too long. Thomasin Bramwell had been standing at the window with her back to the room. She turned round. "Mr. Crome," she said, "where did you get the paper?" The room, which had been noisy, was not noisy anymore. "I do not take your meaning." 11 of those vouchers are Redgate laid from the second vat. It is not a common paper. 200 reams of it were ever made, and my father sold them all, and the last of them, 1 ream, 500 sheets, came into this house 2 years ago in my own trunk, and has never left my own room. She came down the length of the table. I keep my accounts on it. I count what is left on the last night of every month, because it is the last thing of my father's I have, and counting it steadies me. In July there were 61 sheets in my workbox. On the 21st of September there should have been 46 by my own entries, and there were 35. 11 sheets gone out of a locked box. 11 vouchers on my father's paper. She stopped opposite her husband. "2 people have a key to my room, Mr. Crome, and you are not one of them. You could not have taken it. Somebody handed it to you." Nobody in the long room said anything at all. "You wrote the vouchers," Thomasin said to Crome. "I do not doubt it. You are the only man here with a clerk's hand. But you did not take my father's paper out of my locked room, and you did not put Miss Sarn's name on those receipts, and it was not your idea to keep a young woman's brother's indentures in a strong box in this house, so that she would sign whatever she was given. Procton." Lavinia Sarn stood up. She was white to the lips, exactly as she had been on the lawn in July, and she pulled off the gray glove from her right hand and held her wrist out into the candlelight for the Duke of Ashcombe to see. And it was the same wrist he had caught on the lawn in July, and it had not healed, and it had not been given the time to. "My brother is 15, she said. "He is bound apprentice to a shipwright at Marlbrook, and the indentures are in that box in the gun-room, and I was told what would become of them." Her voice was bright and hard and breaking. "I signed what I was told to sign. I was told the school was a scandal, and that the trust was to be wound up, and that Mrs. Bramwell was to put her name to it at the garden party. And I believed it, because I have believed everything I was told in that house for 2 years, and I went up that lawn to stop her signing. And I struck the only person in the county who has ever done a decent thing for the people at Nettlecombe." She looked at Thomasin. "He walked me indoors on your arm," she said. "I have thought about it every day since, and I do not know what to do with it." The Duke of Ashcombe turned from the window. "Prine," he said, "fetch the strong box out of the gun-room. Do not let Mr. Bramwell go anywhere at all." Michaelmas was a Tuesday. By the Friday there was nothing left standing. Peveril Crome went before the Marlbrook bench and afterward to the assizes, and there was very little found on him because he had been paid a clerk's share of it and had spent it like a clerk. Hollis Bramwell went with him. The paper did for them both. It was in the end a very simple case, because the whole of it turned on 11 sheets and a watermark, and there is no arguing with a sheet of paper about what it is made of. Thomasin took no pleasure in any of it. She had expected to, and she did not. What she felt in the courtroom at Marlbrook was the sober, tired satisfaction of a thing set straight, which is a quieter feeling than people suppose, and goes deeper. The trust was made up to the last shilling, and the £400 the Duke had paid in for the school and never seen laid out was made up with it. What could be recovered was recovered, and what could not, which was the greater part, the Duke of Ashcombe put back out of his own pocket without any discussion whatever, and would not afterward be thanked for it. Josiah Mould's grandson mended the almshouse roofs before the winter and was paid what the work truly cost, £106, and not 1 shilling more, and the bucket in the end house was put out in the yard and used for the coals. 12 chimneys smoked that Christmas. Barnaby Fisk was paid at Christmas, and at Lady Day, and at midsummer, out of Thomason's own earnings, because Lady Almeria had put her in charge of the whole Nettlecombe business at £80 a year, and had made her take it. On the day the 14th payment was made, Fisk gave her the bond back across the counter, and she carried it 7 miles home, and did not burn it, but put it in the workbox with her father's paper, because it was the only thing she had ever signed that she was proud of. Lavinia Sarn was not turned out, and was not forgiven all at once either. A woman does not unlearn 2 years of fear in a season, and she was proud, and she had a great deal to be proud about, and no ground left to stand on. But her brother's indentures were put into her own hands, and she came up to Nettlecombe in the spring at Thomason's asking, and it turned out that she could read and write and add, and had a way with old people that nobody had ever asked her for. She was made matron of the 12 almshouses. She was extremely good at it. She terrorized the coal merchant. The 2 women never became friends exactly, but they reached the particular respect of people who both know how tiring it is to be afraid in a comfortable house, and Ephraim Chance thought her the finest thing that had happened to the terrace in 40 years, and told her so, and made her a set of elder pegs. "You could have come to me in September," the Duke of Ashcombe said, much later, when the 2 of them were shutting up the school one evening in the following June. "You would not have believed me in September." "No," he said, "I would not. A man who has paid £400 not to look at a place does not want a stranger to tell him what it has come to. So I did not bring you a suspicion. I waited until I could bring you a thing you could not refuse." He stood in the doorway with the key in his hand. "Thank you," he said. "I do not think I have ever said it. Thank you." It was 3 words from a man who did not spend them, and they were worth a great deal more than 3. "She would have liked you," he said. Ismay. She had no patience whatever with people who kept their heads down. It took 2 years and an Act of Parliament and the whole of the Duke of Ashcombe's interest to end the marriage, and it was slow and it was public, and Thomason found she minded the public part very much less than she had expected to. They were married quietly at Nettlecombe Church, where Ismay Bramwell lay, on a Tuesday in July, with the children of the school in the porch and Hannah Poole ringing a bell that had a new rope on it. Lady Almeria came on her grandson's arm, which is to say, on the arm of the Duke, since she had 1 grandson left that she owned 2, and she wept exactly once and announced that it was the outside limit of what any sensible woman ought to allow herself. She lived 3 years more. She learned the names of all the almshouse people, and would have them up to the south rooms one at a time to be read to, which they endured. She died in her chair on a bright October morning with her spine perfectly straight, and that was the one thing the summer never mended, and Thomason did not expect it to. The dead do not come back, because the living have finally learned to be happy. It is only that the house goes on. Enoch Prine stayed at Halstow to the end of his days, and was several times heard to say that he had never in 60 years seen a great house put right from the wrong end, and was never once heard to say what he had thought in a dark passage on the night of the garden party. On a warm evening, at the end of that first summer, the Duke of Ashcombe came looking for his wife. He found her where he had half known he would, in the schoolroom at Nettlecombe with the windows open and the last of the light coming through them, sitting on a bench with a single sheet of paper held up at arm's length toward the sky. "There is nothing left to save," he said from the doorway. "You have put the whole of it in order. What will you do with yourself now, Duchess?" Thomason lowered the sheet and looked at him down the length of the schoolroom, level and clear and unafraid, in exactly the way she had looked at him across a lawn in July, On the afternoon, a man had told his agent that there was no more spirit in her than a blank sheet. "I shall find something," she said. "I always do. I cannot bear waste. It is my besetting fault." The almost smile. "Come and sit down," she said. "You are drowning in the doorway again." He came and sat down. The last of the Redgate Lade was long since used up, all but a single sheet, which she had kept back and never written on, and could not have said why. It was that sheet she was holding, and it went on being blank all her life, and she had it framed in the end, and hung it in the schoolroom, where the children could see it. And when they asked her what it was, she told them it was the most valuable paper in England, because there was nothing on it yet, and every word that ever went on it would be her own.